I was pouring my daughter's orange juice when a man in a gray suit handed me a thick envelope at my front door, and the second I saw my husband's name on it, my stomach dropped. I opened it right there at my kitchen counter and read that Grant wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was calling me unstable, irresponsible, and unfit to be a mother. My hands started shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers, and all I could think was, how does the man who begged me to give up my career now want to erase me completely? I could already feel the trap closing, and I hated how scared I was in my own home. They thought they were in control, but they didn't know something I had already prepared. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask for a small favor. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. And let me know which country and city you're listening from so I can thank you properly as we go through this together. I was pouring Nia's orange juice when the doorbell rang. I didn't think much of it, figured it was a package or some neighbor's lost mail. But when I opened the door, there was a man in a gray suit holding a thick envelope. No smile, just a clipboard. "For Danielle Carter," he said. I signed without thinking. The second I saw Grant's name on the envelope, my chest tightened. I tore it open right there in the kitchen, the edge of the paper slicing my thumb as I pulled out the papers. At first, I didn't fully understand. I saw the words, "dissolution of marriage," and then my eyes locked on the phrase, "petition for full custody." My breath caught. I dropped everything on the counter and grabbed the edge of the sink like it could hold me up. The kitchen felt too quiet, too still, like the house itself knew what was coming. I picked up the papers again and kept reading, but the words blurred. Irresponsible, unstable, mentally unfit. The room started to spin. I had to sit down. I slid into the kitchen chair, hands trembling, the papers shaking in them. I read and reread the accusations. Grant said I had emotional instability and impulsive spending habits. He made it sound like I was reckless, like I was some selfish woman who couldn't be trusted to care for her own child. I wanted to scream. The man who convinced me to leave my job, the one who insisted I stay home and raise our daughter, was now turning that very choice into a weapon against me. I remembered him smiling in that quiet, smug way when I said I missed work, how he'd said, "You don't need stress right now." I thought he was being kind. Looking back, it was control disguised as care. I felt like such a fool. I thought about Nia upstairs, still in her pajamas, watching cartoons. She had no idea that her world might be ripped apart because her father had rewritten me as the villain. The anger came fast, but it didn't stay alone. It was followed by something deeper, colder, fear. Not fear of being alone. That I could survive. But fear of being erased. Of a judge looking at a version of me that wasn't real and deciding Grant was right. That I was the unstable one. That I didn't deserve to raise my own daughter. That word, unfit, it echoed in my head like a sentence. I thought about every parent-teacher meeting I went to alone, every school lunch I packed, every night I sat up with Nia when she had a fever. Would that count for nothing if he framed the story well enough? I couldn't stop imagining him in some meeting room with a lawyer, going over every way he could make me look small. I felt violated, betrayed, hunted. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even cry. I just sat there staring at the document, numb. My brain started racing, trying to piece together how long he'd been planning this. When did he stop being my husband and start being my enemy? Was it when he started locking his office door? When he stopped saying "we" and started saying "I"? Every memory suddenly looked different. Conversations I thought were normal now felt like setups. The budgeting spreadsheets he made me sign off on. The times he accused me of misplacing receipts. The new phone he insisted I use that conveniently couldn't access our joint banking app. I hadn't seen it then. I see it now. It wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic. I stood up and looked around my kitchen. The dishes from breakfast were still in the sink. Nia's cereal box was open on the counter. Nothing had changed, but everything had. I walked to the back door and just stood there for a moment, hand on the knob, trying to breathe. My life wasn't falling apart. It was being dismantled, one calculated step at a time. I wanted to scream into the sky, but instead I clenched my jaw and held it in. I felt like I was shrinking, like the Danielle I used to be was being buried under someone else's narrative. I wasn't ready to fight, but I also couldn't let myself be erased. I had to find out what he'd already done, and fast. When Nia came down the stairs asking if we could go to the park, I smiled and said yes, even though my heart felt like it was caught in a vice. I packed her snacks and grabbed the papers off the counter, tucking them into my purse without letting her see. As we drove, she sang along to some pop song, and I just kept nodding, pretending like everything was fine. But inside, something shifted. The fog of confusion was gone. In its place, there was fire. I didn't know how to fight yet or where to begin, but I knew one thing. Grant Carter wasn't going to take my daughter from me, not without a war. And whether I liked it or not, that war had just begun. The chair was stiff and squeaky, and the air in the attorney's office smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. I sat across from her, holding a manila folder that was basically empty. Just a printout of an old joint bank statement and a grocery receipt I found in the glove compartment. She introduced herself. Angela Bell, divorce and custody law, 20 years of experience. But her eyes softened the second she saw how tight I was gripping the folder. I was trying to sit up straight, look capable, but the truth was, I felt like a mess. I told her Grant filed for full custody and claimed I was unstable. Her mouth tightened just a bit, not judgmental, more like she'd heard it before. Then she asked, "Tell me about your finances." And I froze for a second, because I didn't really know. I didn't have the logins. I didn't see the credit card bills anymore. I hadn't in years. I used to manage my own checking account, I told her. But after I stopped working, Grant said we should simplify everything, so we merged most things into his business account. He said it would be easier for taxes. I could hear how stupid it sounded as the words left my mouth. Angela didn't say anything, just nodded slowly and asked, "Do you know how much is in your savings right now?" I laughed under my breath. Not a happy laugh, one of those tight, broken ones that leaks out when you're embarrassed and don't know what else to do. "No," I admitted. "I haven't seen our savings account in at least a year." She leaned forward, pen in hand, and asked if I had any access to credit card records or receipts for household expenses. My silence answered for me. "Grant handled that too," I said, staring at the ugly carpet. "He'd give me a prepaid card for groceries and gas. If I asked for something extra, we'd have to sit down and talk about the budget." That phrase made my skin crawl. Those budget talks always ended the same way. Me apologizing for something I didn't even realize I'd done wrong. One time, it was because I'd spent $18 on a birthday present for Nia's classmate without asking. Another time, it was because I bought a second bottle of conditioner when we already had one in the cabinet. I'd walk away from those conversations feeling like a teenager who got caught sneaking out. Angela was writing something down, but I could feel her attention still on me. "Danielle, what I'm hearing is financial control. It's more common than you think, but it's serious, especially when there's a custody case involved." My throat got tight. Just hearing someone say it out loud, like it wasn't just in my head, hit me hard. I felt tears rising and tried to blink them away. She asked for documents, tax returns, bank records, proof of payments. I told her I didn't have access to any of it, that Grant kept everything on his work laptop, locked with a password I never knew. She asked if I ever signed anything. I told her yes, but I didn't always know what I was signing. He'd hand me papers in the middle of dinner, say just routine stuff, and I'd sign while trying to cut up Nia's chicken. Her face didn't change, but I saw it in her eyes. Concern. Not pity, but something close to it. I felt myself shrink in the chair. I hated how naive I sounded. I wasn't stupid. I was just trusting, or maybe tired, or both. And now I was the one scrambling to understand a financial life I had been locked out of, while Grant got to play the calm, responsible parent. When the meeting ended, I thanked her and walked to the parking lot in silence, hugging that empty folder to my chest like it meant something. The sun was too bright, and everything felt loud and far away. I sat in my car with the engine off, windows rolled up, and stared at the dashboard. I felt small, exposed, like I'd been stripped down to nothing in front of a stranger. But strangely, I also felt something I hadn't felt since I got that envelope. Validation. Angela believed me. She didn't laugh. She didn't say I was overreacting. She saw the pattern and she called it what it was. That meant I wasn't crazy. That meant I had a place to start. As I drove home, I replayed her words in my head. This is serious. You need to prepare for war. I clung to that word. Prepare. It meant I still had some power left, even if it was small. I couldn't go back and undo what I signed or find the receipts I never had, but I could move forward. Strategically. Carefully. I thought about Nia, about what it would do to her if I lost custody, and something shifted in me during that drive. Not a dramatic transformation, but the beginning of one. The shame was still there, sitting heavy in my chest, but now it had company, anger, determination, and a quiet voice inside me that said, "Get ready. You've got a lot more fight in you than he thinks." Nia was scooping mashed potatoes onto her plate when Grant started in. His voice was soft, even friendly, but I could feel the poison in every word. "You've been slipping a lot lately," he said, cutting into his steak like we were just chatting about the weather. "You forgot Nia's dentist appointment last week. And didn't you say the electric bill got paid twice?" I looked up at him, fork paused in midair. My first instinct was confusion, because none of that had actually happened. But then I caught his eyes. Steady, calculated. He wanted me off balance. I glanced at Nia. She was quiet, eyes bouncing between us, not sure if she should keep eating or run. "That's not true," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The dentist rescheduled, and I've never double paid a bill. You know that." But my voice betrayed me, sharper than I intended, too quick. His lips curled into the faintest smile, like he'd just won a round. "I'm not attacking you," he said, hands raised slightly, still so calm. "I'm just concerned. We've been going through a lot, and I know that sometimes stress makes people act impulsively, spend too much, forget important things. It's okay to admit that." My stomach clenched. I saw what he was doing now, pushing buttons, framing a story, and he was doing it in front of Nia. I turned to her, trying to say something normal, but she was already staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear. "Grant, enough," I said. "This isn't a therapy session." His smile didn't drop. "Of course, I'm just trying to make sure our daughter is safe and stable. That's all." And with that word, stable, I felt the heat rush to my face. He was planting it on purpose, like a seed he knew would sprout in court. After dinner, I went straight to the living room, trying to shake the conversation off. I was still rattled. I kept replaying it, wondering if I'd raised my voice too much, if Nia had been scared. I wanted to scream. Not because of what he said, but because I knew what he was doing and couldn't stop it. He was building a case, one dinner at a time. I started picking up some books off the floor near the bookshelf when something caught my eye. A small black object tucked into the space between the frame and the wall. At first, I thought it was one of Nia's toys, but when I pulled it out, my heart dropped. A camera. One of those little motion-triggered ones. My hands started shaking. I turned it over, looked at the tiny lens. It had been on the whole time, recording. I stared at it like it was a bomb, because in a way it was. I sat down on the couch, camera still in my hand, unable to breathe right. He'd recorded the whole thing, not just tonight. Who knew how many nights? Every sharp word, every sigh, every second I looked tired or distracted or frustrated. All of it, stored somewhere, ready to be clipped and edited into his version of our life. I felt sick, used, and stupid. All those times I thought I was losing control. Turns out I was being pushed, triggered, filmed. He wanted to make me look unstable, and now I realized he'd probably been setting me up for months. I didn't even know what I'd walked into until it was too late. This wasn't a breakup. It was a campaign, a takedown, and I was the target. I wanted to run upstairs and scream at him, demand an explanation, but I didn't. I stayed right there, camera in hand, because I knew now anything I said, any move I made could be twisted. He was building something, and I needed to be smarter. I needed to stop reacting and start thinking. I turned the camera off, put it in my pocket, and sat in silence for a long time. My mind raced through every moment over the last few weeks. The arguments he'd quietly walked away from. The times I cried alone in the kitchen. Were they all saved somewhere? Labeled and time-stamped? I felt violated, betrayed, like my own house wasn't mine anymore. But beneath the humiliation, something harder was forming. Clarity. By the time I got Nia into bed and closed her door, I was done shaking. I stood in the hallway for a long minute, staring at the photos on the wall. Our wedding, a beach trip, Nia's preschool graduation. All lies now. Or maybe they'd always been. I walked back to the living room, sat on the floor, and stared at that bookshelf. How many cameras were hidden in this house? How many moments of my life had he collected like evidence? I didn't have the answer. But I did have the truth now. This wasn't just about him leaving me. He wanted to destroy me, strip me down until the only thing left was his version of me. And I'd be damned if I let that happen without a fight. The doorbell rang right at 10:01 a.m., sharp and rehearsed. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door to find Dr. Lauren Price standing there, holding a leather portfolio and wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my entire grocery budget. She smiled, perfect teeth, calm eyes, not too warm, but not cold either. "Danielle, I'm Dr. Price," she said, like I was the one being interviewed. I stepped aside, letting her in, and tried to steady my breathing. "Come on in," I said, forcing a polite smile. She walked into my living room like she already knew the layout, her eyes scanning everything. She wasn't just looking at furniture, she was calculating. I could feel it. The chipped paint near the baseboards, the stack of unopened mail, the laundry basket half tucked behind the couch. My house suddenly felt too small, too cluttered, too loud. She didn't sit. Instead, she walked around slowly, glancing at Nia's drawings on the fridge and the bookshelf full of cookbooks I hadn't opened in months. "So," she began, still looking around, "tell me about how Nia's been adjusting lately. Any changes in her behavior?" I tried to answer calmly. "She's been a little quiet, but nothing unusual. It's been a lot with school starting." She nodded, writing something down. "And how have you been coping with the transition?" The way she said "you" made it feel like a trap. I smiled thinly. "I'm managing." But that wasn't the right answer, apparently. She looked at me like she wanted more. I felt myself tightening up. Every word I said felt like a test I didn't study for. I hated the way she kept her voice smooth, even when asking things that felt loaded. "Do you ever feel overwhelmed caring for Nia on your own during the day?" My hands gripped each other under the table. I wanted to scream, "What kind of mother wouldn't?" But I said, "Of course, sometimes. I think that's normal." Her pen moved again. I offered her coffee, just to fill the silence. She declined with a sweet smile. I asked if she wanted to speak with Nia directly, and she said, "Later. I like to get a sense of the home first." The word "sense" made my stomach turn. It wasn't about facts. It was about how things felt to her. And clearly, she had already decided what she was looking for. She walked into the hallway and peeked into the bathroom without asking. I followed her, trying not to look defensive, but it was too late. I was defensive. Because who wouldn't be? With a stranger, an expert, assessing every inch of your home, your tone, your child, your life. I felt like I was being dissected. When she finally sat down and pulled out a small notepad, she asked if Nia had witnessed any arguments lately. "We've had tense moments," I said honestly, "but we never fight in front of her." She didn't write that part down. The visit lasted an hour, but it felt like 5. By the end of it, I was mentally drained, pretending to smile while walking her to the door. She thanked me for my openness and said she looked forward to speaking more with Nia in a calm setting. I nodded, biting my tongue. When the door finally closed, I leaned against it and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stood there, heart pounding, realizing that no matter how I acted, it wouldn't be enough. She didn't come to understand me. She came to confirm whatever Grant told her. I could feel it in the way she framed her questions, in the way she smiled too tightly whenever I said something that didn't fit the story she already believed. Later that night, I was walking past the study when I heard Grant's voice. I stopped when I heard him say her name. "Lauren, babe, don't stress. She won't know what hit her. Just stick to the plan." I froze. Every part of my body turned cold. I backed up, careful not to make a sound. I couldn't hear the rest, but it didn't matter. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't think straight. He wasn't just sleeping with the therapist, he was colluding with her. The expert brought in to assess me, to evaluate our daughter. That explained everything. The fake warmth, the rehearsed questions, the eyes that weren't curious, just confirming. I felt something inside me crack, like glass under pressure. All the fear I'd been feeling turned into something else, something sharper. I sat on the edge of my bed later, staring at the floor, hands clenched. This wasn't just unfair, it was sick. They were trying to rewrite me into some unstable stereotype, to take Nia away from me based on lies and performances. And the judge would never know unless I found a way to prove it. My brain was racing, trying to hold on to facts, words, dates, anything that could help. I wasn't just up against Grant now. I was up against a system, a performance, a whole damn strategy. And the worst part? They were good at it. But I wasn't the same woman who froze in Angela's office, embarrassed and confused. Not anymore. If they wanted a war, they were about to get one. My knees were pulled up to my chest on my mama's couch, a paper napkin balled up in my fist, soaked through with tears and snot. She sat across from me in her old armchair, quiet, like she was weighing something heavy in her mouth before letting it out. I'd barely finished telling her about the cameras, about Dr. Price, about the way Grant was building this lie around me like a damn prison. I expected her to say what she always did, "Baby, you gotta stay calm," or "just be smart." But instead, she stared at her hands, then looked straight at me and said, "I should have told you a long time ago, but I thought if I kept it quiet, you'd be safe." I sat up, confused, heart already beating fast. "Told me what?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just pressed her lips together and nodded like she'd already decided it was time. She said there was another woman before me, a girlfriend Grant had in college, someone who filed a complaint about him, something serious. Mama didn't have all the details, but she said the girl dropped out halfway through the semester and the whole thing got swept under the rug. Grant's father, who had money and connections even back then, made it disappear, paid off the girl's family, kept it quiet. "I heard about it from someone at church," Mama said. "She knew the girl's cousin. I tried to talk to you when y'all first got engaged. You said I was just being overprotective." My hand started shaking. "Wait, what are you saying? That he, hurt her?" Mama didn't answer directly, but the way her eyes filled said enough. My breath caught in my chest. This man wasn't just manipulative. He had a pattern, a history, and no one had stopped him. I stood up and started pacing. My head felt hot, like there wasn't enough air in the room. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" I snapped. I wasn't trying to yell, but it came out sharp. She didn't flinch. "Because I thought maybe he'd changed. Because you loved him. Because by the time I realized you were in too deep, you already had Nia, and I didn't want to add fuel to your fire. I was scared. I figured if I stayed close, I could at least help you if something ever happened." I sat back down hard. Rage and grief slammed into me at the same time. I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. But this was a deeper kind. Not just from him. From the silence that had protected him all along. I felt like a fool all over again. I thought about that girl, whoever she was, how she probably saw the same smile I once fell for, the same charm. I imagined what she must have gone through, what it cost her to come forward, and then to be shut down, silenced, erased, just like Grant was trying to do to me now. It wasn't just my custody case anymore. It was a cycle, a sickness, A man who moved through women like they were obstacles, who had the money and backing to rewrite the truth every time. And I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last unless I did something about it. That realization hit me like a slap. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting to end something that had gone unchecked for too long. And it scared me. But mixed into that fear was something else, a clarity I hadn't had before. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was bigger. That quiet little file Grant had started building on me, I was about to build one on him, starting with this. I asked Mama everything she remembered, names, places. Who at church told her. She didn't remember it all, but she promised to try. She even said she'd ask around discreetly. I nodded, grateful and still hurting. Because even though I was angry at her for keeping it from me, I understood it. Sometimes we hide things to feel safe. But I wasn't going to hide anymore. By the time I left her house, the sun was already starting to set. The sky was streaked in pink and gray, and the air smelled like cut grass. I walked to the car, feeling heavier, but also more grounded. The secret didn't break me. It lit something inside me. I didn't feel crazy anymore. I didn't feel alone. I was part of a pattern, and now that I knew, I could fight it. I looked at my reflection in the car window and whispered, "No more silence." If Grant had been protected before, that protection was over. I was done playing quiet. I was done letting fear decide for me. From that moment on, every step I took would be loud, deliberate, and mine. The room was small and cold, with one of those glass-top desks that always makes you feel like you're doing something wrong just by sitting across from it. I could hear the low hum of the AC vent behind me and the soft clack of the keyboard as the bank rep pulled up the account information. I had made the appointment first thing that morning, told them I needed to review our joint savings and checking, just to see what was left. I'd practiced sounding casual on the phone, like I was just updating paperwork. But inside, I was already bracing for something ugly. The woman, Susan I think, tilted her screen slightly and squinted. "Okay, so here are the last 90 days of activity," she said, sliding a printed sheet across the desk. My eyes scanned the columns. The balance that used to show 5 figures was down to a few $100s. I felt it like a punch to the gut. At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. I double-checked the dates, then the account numbers. Nope, it was ours, our joint account. And the savings, too. That one had been almost completely drained over the past month. Several transfers, same amount, same destination. "That's not normal," I whispered. My throat felt tight, my fingers frozen around the paper. Susan's smile faded. "Are you saying you didn't authorize those withdrawals?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't even know this was happening." She straightened up. "Well, I can't give you details on the receiving accounts without a court order, I'm afraid, especially if they're in his name only." I could barely hear her anymore. My pulse was pounding in my ears. My palms were sweaty. Grant had taken almost everything, quietly, intentionally, and timed perfectly before the next hearing. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. "Can I get printed records of all the activity from the last 6 months?" I asked. My voice came out tight, like it didn't belong to me. She nodded and stepped out to get the files. I sat there gripping the edge of the chair, trying not to cry in front of a stranger. I felt small, played, stupid again. This wasn't just financial control. This was sabotage, strategic, silent, and cold. He knew the timing. Knew how the court would interpret me showing up without resources, without proof I could support Nia. He was building a case where I looked irresponsible, and I could feel him tightening the rope around my neck with every move. The worst part? It was working. It was all working. And I was sitting in a bank office, helpless. When I left the building, I didn't go home right away. I sat in the car with the air off and the windows cracked, staring at nothing. The heat wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't want. I thought about the locked office in our house, Grant's private little world, the one I never had access to. There had to be more inside. Records, passwords, maybe even footage from those damn cameras. I hated myself for even thinking it, but for the first time, I understood the temptation. I imagined myself breaking in, going through drawers, finding something that could tip this whole thing back in my favor. Something that showed the truth. And the fact that it even crossed my mind scared me. That's how far he'd pushed me. That's how cornered I felt. I argued with myself the whole drive home. You can't stoop to his level, I muttered. But then the other voice, the scared, angry one, whispered, you can't afford not to. Angela had warned me this could get ugly. But I'd still held on to the hope that if I just told the truth, stayed calm, it would all sort itself out. That hope felt childish now. The system didn't care how kind you were. It cared about evidence, stability, money, things Grant had taken from me one by one. I started to realize that playing nice might cost me everything, my dignity, my child, my future, and I couldn't let that happen. When I walked back into the house, I didn't go to the kitchen or call Nia. I walked straight to the hallway, stood in front of that locked office door, and just stared at it. I didn't try the handle. I didn't knock. I just stood there, hand hovering inches from the knob. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But something had shifted. I could feel it in my bones. I wasn't fighting for a marriage anymore. I wasn't even just fighting for custody. I was fighting for the right to be seen, to be believed. And maybe that meant doing things I never thought I'd do. Maybe survival looked different when the person trying to destroy you knew all your soft spots. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. I didn't cross the line that day, but the line had moved, and I knew I'd be back. The hallway was dark except for the nightlight casting a soft glow from Nia's room. I stood there barefoot, arms crossed over my chest, staring at the locked door to Grant's office. My stomach was tight. That kind of tight you get when your body's bracing for something it knows might go wrong. I could hear Nia's steady breathing from her room. She'd finally fallen asleep after asking for 2 stories and a nightlight check. Meanwhile, I hadn't rested in days. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but my mind kept spinning. That office held answers. I was sure of it. Bank records, passwords, maybe even copies of those videos he'd used to bait me. If I could just get inside. But the doorknob didn't budge. He kept it locked at all times now, like a vault holding my future. I pressed my fingers lightly against the wood, feeling its cool, smooth surface. The urge was strong. All I had to do was find a screwdriver, or maybe a hairpin. I'd watched enough videos online to know it wasn't impossible. And the idea of catching him in a lie, finally having proof, felt like air to a drowning woman. But then another voice kicked in. Angela's voice, reminding me about the court, about how every action could be used against me. They're waiting for you to snap, she had said. Don't give them what they want. Grant knew I was desperate. He knew I needed answers. And part of me suspected he left certain things just out of reach on purpose. Like bait. I clenched my jaw and leaned my head against the door, eyes shut, heart racing. I stayed like that for a long minute, trapped between 2 versions of myself. The one who wanted to tear the door off its hinges, and the one who knew the price of losing control. Every day I was being painted as unstable, irrational, volatile. What would it look like if I broke in? Even if I found something, how could I prove I hadn't tampered with it? I imagined the courtroom, imagined Grant's lawyer smiling as he held up a photo of a broken lock. See, Your Honor? She's unpredictable, untrustworthy. I pulled back, stepping away from the door. The hallway felt tighter somehow, the air heavier. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of choosing not to act. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, drinking it slowly, trying to calm myself down. My reflection in the microwave door looked worn out, older somehow. But there was something else in my eyes, too. Restraint. The kind that hurts, but also holds you up when everything's falling apart. I wasn't going to let Grant control the narrative, not like this. I hated that he still had the power to make me second-guess every move. But giving in to that hate would only feed the version of me he was selling to the court. And I couldn't afford that. Not for me, not for Nia. When I walked back down the hall, I paused in front of the office one last time. I whispered, "You're not going to win like this," even though I knew he couldn't hear me. Maybe I needed to hear it more than he ever would. I turned away, went into my room, and closed the door behind me. I lay in bed with my eyes open, heart still racing. The silence was thick. Every part of me ached to do something, to fight harder, to stop playing nice. But tonight, my strength was in doing nothing, in staying still, in protecting my case and my daughter, even when it meant swallowing the fire in my throat. I didn't fall asleep easily, but when I did, it wasn't from peace. It was from pure exhaustion. That night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sick, angry, cornered, but also sure, because that locked door didn't win. I did. I made a choice, one that cost me something, but gave me something too. Proof can come in different forms, and maybe someday I'd find another way to get inside. But tonight, I proved to myself that I'm not the woman he's trying to paint me as. I'm not broken. I'm not out of control. I'm just a mother in a war she didn't start, holding the line in the only way she can. The bench outside the courtroom felt like it was digging into my back, but I didn't move. I just sat there, clutching my phone in one hand and the edge of my purse in the other, trying to breathe through the nerves rattling in my chest. Grant stood 10 feet away, laughing with his attorney like they were at a wedding reception. I watched them shake hands with the bailiff, nod politely to the clerk, all polished and prepared, while I sat there feeling like the accused. I glanced at the courtroom doors, thinking how absurd it was that I had to walk in there and prove I was a good mother, like that wasn't already written into my bones. My lawyer, Angela, sat beside me flipping through a folder, but I barely heard her when she said, "Don't let them rattle you. Stick to the facts." I nodded, even though I felt like I was already unraveling. Inside the courtroom, everything looked too bright, too clean. The judge walked in and we all rose. I tried to keep my shoulders back, head high. But the second Dr. Lauren Price was called to the stand, my throat tightened. She walked up confidently, dressed like she was running a TED Talk. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain. She described me as unpredictable and easily overwhelmed, said Nia showed signs of emotional tension after being with me. She said she had clinical concerns about my ability to provide consistency. I gripped the edge of the table, heart pounding, face burning. Every lie was said with such calm it made me question my own memories. I wanted to scream, "You don't know me!" But I stayed quiet, hands shaking under the table. Then they played the video. A 3-minute montage of moments I hadn't even realized were being recorded. Me raising my voice when I was sleep-deprived, me crying in the kitchen after a tense call with Grant, me snapping, "Not now," when Naya interrupted me during a call about the divorce. Each clip chosen to make me look erratic. Not once did they show the hours I spent rocking Nia through her fevers or the birthday cupcakes I stayed up making from scratch. No context, just clips. My face got hot, my ears rang, and for a split second I felt like I was outside of myself, watching a version of me I didn't even recognize. The judge's face didn't change, but I could feel the room shift. I was being framed as the problem. And Grant just sat there, calm as ever, watching it all play out like he was screening a film he'd directed. When they called me to the stand, I stood slowly, legs stiff. My chest felt tight, my mouth dry. I sat down and tried to answer their questions clearly, but my voice shook. Every word felt like walking across a frozen lake. I didn't know what would crack the ice. I tried to explain, to show the full picture, that I was under pressure, that he'd been pushing me for months, but I could see the smirks from Grant's side. The judge asked something about emotional stability, and I paused a second too long. That pause felt like a punch. I almost cried right there. Not because I was weak, but because I knew they were winning. Not with truth, but with performance. I felt the sting of humiliation sitting heavy in my chest. And for a second, I honestly thought I'd break right there. But I didn't. I made it through the testimony. Shaky, yes. But I didn't snap. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. When I stepped off the stand, my knees were barely holding me up. But I walked back to my seat and sat tall. Angela leaned in and whispered, "You held it together. That matters." I nodded, but I didn't believe it, yet. I felt stripped raw, like I'd been opened up in front of strangers and judged on half-truths. But I was still in that chair. I hadn't run, I hadn't fallen apart, and that felt like something. By the time court recessed for the day, I was too drained to speak. The hallway was empty, quiet now. I sat on the same bench, breathing slow, arms wrapped around myself. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, but I was still upright. That counted. It had to. I was frightened, yes, exhausted, angry, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. I closed my eyes and told myself again and again, "You're still standing." It wasn't victory, but it was resistance. It was survival. And for today, that would have to be enough. The courtroom felt colder than usual. I sat at the defense table, still raw from the day before, palms flat against my skirt, trying to keep my breathing even. I hadn't looked at Grant all morning, but I could feel his presence like a weight. His lawyer was doing that fake casual thing again, adjusting his tie like none of this mattered. We were waiting on the next round of witness statements when I noticed movement beside me. Nia stood up, quiet, calm, small, but determined. I turned to her fast, heart thudding in my chest. "Nia?" I whispered, already on edge. She didn't look at me. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear but soft. "Can I show something?" From my phone. Every part of me went cold. I stood halfway, torn between pulling her back into her seat and letting her speak. "She's just a child," Grant's lawyer said, already half smiling, like he was indulging her. But the judge held up his hand. "Let her speak." And then, without a word, Nia pulled out her old phone, the cracked one we hadn't used in months, and handed it to the clerk. I wanted to stop everything. My baby didn't belong in this mess. But something in her face told me not to interfere. So I sat, shaking, while the clerk connected the phone to the screen. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly, and then the video started. At first, it was just audio. Grant's voice, unmistakable, laughing. "All I have to do is push her hard enough, and Lauren will say exactly what we rehearsed," he said. My head snapped toward him. He froze. The room fell silent. Then more audio. Grant talking about draining the accounts, calling me predictable, mocking how I cried in the kitchen after our fake budget talks. "She always apologizes," he chuckled in the video. "You just have to frame it right." And then, clear as day, "This time next month, I'll have full custody and a clean slate. Lauren and I already talked about it." I covered my mouth. Gasps rippled across the room. I couldn't breathe. The weight of that recording crashed into me like a tidal wave. Shock, rage, grief, all flooding my chest at once. I turned slowly to look at Grant. His face was pale, mouth slightly open. The judge's expression had hardened. Angela's eyes were wide, but she didn't speak. No one did. I felt dizzy, like the floor had shifted. My baby, my daughter, had been holding that video the whole time. I didn't know whether to feel proud or broken. She shouldn't have had to do that. She shouldn't have been the one to expose this, but she had. And suddenly, I wasn't the crazy woman anymore. I wasn't the unstable one. The story Grant built so carefully was cracking right there in front of everyone. I felt tears in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Not here. My hands were gripping the table so tightly they ached, but I didn't move. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one on trial. He was. The judge leaned forward, voice tight. "Where did this recording come from?" Nia cleared her throat. "It was on my phone. I recorded it by accident. He didn't know I was there." She sat back down next to me, her small hand finding mine under the table. I squeezed it. I wanted to scoop her up and run out of that room, far away from all of this. But instead, I just held on. Everything was still spinning, but something had shifted. Power, control, truth. They weren't on his side anymore. I watched Grant squirm, his lawyer whispering frantically. The courtroom had changed. I felt it like heat in my chest. And I didn't look away when Grant finally dropped his eyes. The rest of the day moved in a blur. Court was recessed. The judge requested a formal investigation into the audio. But all I could think about was Nia. what it meant that she'd carried this truth alone, that she'd waited for the right moment to let it go. I felt proud, yes, but also wrecked. Because that kind of courage in a child only grows from surviving something unfair. And I couldn't pretend this didn't change her. It changed me too. By the time we got back to the car, I buckled her in slowly, then rested my forehead against the steering wheel, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I didn't win today, not officially, but I saw Grant's mask shatter, and for the first time, everyone else saw it too. The sun hit my face as I stepped out of the courthouse, and for a second I had to close my eyes. The brightness felt almost foreign after the hours we'd spent under those cold, artificial lights. Angela walked beside me, silent but close, her heels clicking against the concrete. My body felt heavy, like I was walking through water, but my chest felt different, lighter, not free, not healed, but released. The judge had spoken clearly. The video was admissible. An emergency review was granted. And Dr. Price? She was now under investigation for ethics violations. Grant didn't say a word as the court adjourned. He didn't have to. I saw it in the way he avoided looking at anyone, especially me. His mask was gone, and I wasn't the one left exposed anymore. We reached the car, and I just stood there for a moment with my hand on the handle, staring at my reflection in the window. I looked tired, worn, but also stronger, like someone who'd just crawled through fire and was still standing. I opened the door and got inside, exhaling slowly. Nia was already buckled in the back seat, quiet, holding her backpack in her lap like a shield. I turned to her, reached back, and touched her knee. "Baby," I said, my voice cracking, "you should never have had to do what you did. That wasn't your job. That was mine." She looked at me, eyes wide and soft, and leaned forward to rest her forehead against the back of my seat. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. That moment cracked something open in me. Not pain, not guilt, just the beginning of release. Driving home, everything outside the window looked sharper. Trees, power lines, even the cracked roads. I think I was noticing things I'd stopped seeing. My mind was still racing, but now it wasn't just fear. It was plans, ideas, possibilities. The judge hadn't handed me a perfect win, but he gave me something Grant had worked hard to take away. Time, space, credibility. And with that space, I could finally think past just surviving. I could start imagining something else. A life where I wasn't walking on eggshells, where I didn't have to explain or defend every breath I took. I didn't even know what that looked like yet, but for the first time in years, I could picture something beyond survival. That meant something. When we got home, I let Nia go straight to her room. I didn't push her to talk. I knew she needed her own space, too. I stood in the doorway of the living room, looking at the couch, the table, the old bookshelf. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. This house wasn't a battlefield anymore. Or at least, not only that. I walked to the kitchen, made tea with shaking hands, and sat down at the table. I opened my notebook and wrote one word at the top of a blank page. Rebuild. Not revenge, not fight, not even freedom. Just that. Rebuild. Something quiet, steady, mine. I don't know what comes next. I'm not naive enough to think it's over. There'll be appeals, paperwork, more court dates, and I'm sure Grant will try to twist the narrative again. But something's different now. The silence has been broken. His lies are out in the open. And my voice, that voice he tried so hard to erase, is louder than it's ever been. Not because I shouted, but because I stayed. Because I stood up. Because my daughter saw me do it. And that, more than anything, is what matters now. So no, I'm not standing in the middle of some perfect, healed ending. I'm standing at the beginning. I still feel bruised. I still wake up tense. But I also feel something else. Autonomy. Power. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. I don't have a fairy tale. But I have a truth that's mine again. A steady breath. A future that doesn't have his hands on it. One honest, messy, beautiful step at a time. Friends, thank you for staying with me through every painful moment of my story and for holding space for my truth. If my journey touched you in any way, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. I'd truly love to know where you're watching from, so tell me in the comments your city and country and share the part that hit your heart the hardest. Your support means more than I can explain, and every message, every like, and every subscription helps these stories reach the people who need them most. If you want more real-life stories about family betrayal, hidden truths, and the fight to reclaim your voice, you'll find many more like this waiting for you right here on the channel. With love and respect.